Hello Mila, hello Jack. Hello everybody else who's watching, and welcome to Storytime with Grandad. Today's book is called Lester and the Unusual Pet. One day, Lester was sitting under the shirts and trousers tree with his friends, Otto and flap-eared Lorna. They were listening to records on Lorna's gramophone. It was an old gramophone, the kind you have to wind up at the side, and the music comes out of a big horn on the top. They were just listening to a song called Happy Feet when they heard an awful noise. Honk, 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 honk. They knew what it was. It was an unpleasant dwarf called Nose with a long nose. Nose never said anything, but he ran around honking through his nose and making himself a nuisance. This time he ran 10 times round the tree, honking very loudly, so that they couldn't hear a thing. Then he snatched one of the records and ran away. Flap-eared Lorna said, "If only we had someone to frighten him away. A big hairy dog to bark at him. A watchdog, that's what we need." "A watchdog would be very nice," said Otto. "But what I have always wanted is a pussycat, a fluffy pussycat with a ribbon around its neck." "No, no," said Lester. "Everybody has them. What you need is an unusual pet." "Such as what?" asked Lorna. "Well, I don't know, do I?" said Lester. "We shall have to go and see the unusual pet man." So they did. They found the unusual pet man sitting on some rocks under a dead tree with his unusual pets. There were not many of them. There was a tired snake. There was nothing very unusual about that, except that it was in a bird cage, drooping out both sides. "Too dull," Lorna said. There was a skinny bird with nasty sharp teeth. "Too bony," Otto said. "What about a potato animal?" asked the unusual pet man. "They're not much trouble." The potato animal looked just like a potato, with 2 little eyes near the top. "How do we know it's not just a potato?" said Lorna. The unusual pet man said that generally you could hear a potato animal singing quietly to itself. Lorna listened carefully, but she couldn't hear anything, so that was no good. The only thing left was a pet called the bin mouth. You pressed one of its feet on the front and its mouth opened. "It eats rubbish," said the unusual pet man. "Tins, bottles, bones, very good if you got a lot of rubbish." Lorna and Lester looked at each other. "We'll try it," said Lester. When they got back, they fed it 8 tins, a plastic bottle, a broken electric torch, 3 electric light bulbs, and an enamel mug with a hole in the bottom. The trouble was, every 5 minutes the bin mouth fell asleep, and when it fell asleep, it fell over. The tins inside it went bing, dong, boing, clank. It was nearly as bad as Nose. Next morning they took the bin mouth back to the unusual pet man and asked if they could change it for something else. "I don't think there is anything else," said the unusual pet man. Lester, Lorna and Otto all looked very sad. It seemed that they were not going to have an unusual pet. When suddenly the unusual pet man said, "I know what. Here you are, the very thing." And he gave them a small cardboard box. They took the box away and opened it. Inside there were 2 things, a little book and a long piece of string. Then they noticed that the piece of string had a little head at one end and small feet at the other. It really was an unusual pet. Lester looked at the little book. On the front it said, "The String Thing." hints on the care of your unusual pet, and it told you how to look after the string thing. For instance, one thing that the string thing likes very much is a bath in warm soapy water. Lorna tied an apron around her waist and gave the string thing a bath in a tin bathtub. While she was doing that, Lester and Otto went off to the toys and games tree and found a kite. When the string thing had finished its bath, it held onto the kite and it blew about in the wind until it was dry and nicely stretched. After that, the string thing wound itself around a tree, and Lester swung it like a skipping rope, so that flap-eared Lorna could skip. Lorna was very good at skipping, even with her roller skates on. The string thing also liked holding on to the branch of a tree, while Otto twanged him gently in a restful tune. Next day they did skipping again. They all had a turn, even Otto. When they were tired out, they sat down on some rocks to have a rest. Sitting near them was Mrs. Grimstone, the champion knitter, who was knitting a sock for a giant. She knits very fast, and her knitting needles move so quickly you can hardly see them. Unfortunately, the string thing got a bit too close, and the next minute he was being knitted up into Mrs. Grimstone's enormous sock. Mrs. Grimstone was going so fast that it took her several minutes to stop. She had to unpick a lot of knitting before they could get the string thing out, and when they did, he looked very crinkly indeed. It took them a long time to get him straight again. They sat down to play gramophone records to calm the string thing after his nasty shock. They played Top Hat and Happy Feet, and were beginning to feel better when they heard a noise in the distance. Honk, honk. Oh dear, said Lorna, not him again. The string thing stood up as high as he could. When he saw that it was Nose, he quickly curled himself up into the branches of the shirts and trousers tree. So much for your unusual pet, said Lorna. I knew we should have had an Airedale. She picked up the records and roller skated off with Lester and Otto to hide behind a big rock, where they hoped they would be safe. They heard the nose noises coming closer. Honk, honk. Then they got very loud. Honk, 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 honk. Suddenly, they faded away. Lester, Lorna and Otto came out from behind their rock. They looked all around. There was the gramophone, quite safe. No dwarf. Then they heard a noise above them and looked up. Nose was hanging from the branches of the tree, held there by the string thing, who was twined and looped tightly around him. Nose had honked until he ran out of honks and gone limp. If we ask the string thing to let you go, will you promise not to come around honking and taking our records? Asked Lester. 1 honk for yes, 2 honks for no. Nose went very faintly. Honk. Unusual pet and watchdog too, said Lorna. The string thing wound himself round them affectionately, and they sat around the gramophone and played Happy Feet 7 times straight off. The end. Goodbye, Mila. Goodbye, Jack. I'll see you soon. Goodbye, everybody. Bye.